from there, I knew I had to get my first video up very soon because I knew I could also, and I see this with the guys that reach out to me now. It's like, I want to start something, I have this idea, and I always tell them, like, just post something, get something started, because you could sit there forever and never move forward, but until you start to get some kind of feedback, until you make it real, that's when things start to move. So I personally
listening to Going Deep with Aaron Watson.
Get down.
You're going deep.
That's the nice thing about doing this with a pro, in the sense that you create a lot of content. You kind of have a framework, a comfort around it. The cameras being here, you're not going to be thrown by any of that stuff.
No, I'm used to it.
When you
camera on me all the time.
When you started, how difficult was it?
When I started my YouTube channel?
Or just creating content in general, like the first stuff you were creating, how stressful was that?
Well, the first stuff I started making was when I was 8 years old. I had my mom's camcorder, and I would film my cousins, and we'd make movies and put them on VHS tapes, and I'd make copies of the VHS tapes for my family. And then when I was in high school, I joined the video club. Because I had done that as a kid, I was like, I want to do some video stuff. And I became like buddies with the guy who ran the video club, and then everybody graduated. So I was the only member of the video club for 2 years. And I would go to sports events and film those, and wrestling and football. And I would go all over the place and like do all this stuff. So I was the only one that he was like, we got to do all this stuff to do the video club. And then when he was like, I want to be the first video production course at this high school. So Baldwin High School. So it was Mr. Schulte. I still talk to him to this day. He was like, when you think about the great teachers like in your life, he was one of the great teachers. And he was like, I want to do a video production course. And so like for 2 years, we kind of massaged this idea of like, what does a video production course look like? What do the different breakouts of, projects and that sort of thing? And then he took it to the school board, and then it actually got implemented my last year. It became a video production course. So I was doing stuff then. I was like making music videos and like stupid videos all the time in my own time. Then I would do the stuff for video club, and then video production kind of launched. And that was a really easy A for me. That was probably the first A I got in high school. I was a disruptive, bored, poor high school student. Wow. And then I kind of found my way with a graphic design course. I got introduced to Photoshop and Illustrator, and I absolutely fell in love. That's where I learned Premiere and like all the inner workings of recording video and burning discs and everything. We had a 10-disc DVD burner. That was like the big piece of hardware that we bought with our video production budget, so that we could burn multiple discs at one time. And then from there, I figured I wanted to go to an accredited design school. And so that's how I ended up at La Roche. La Roche is an accredited graphic design school. And that's when I kept going further into that, like photo manipulation and design and everything.
But you're describing a club of which you kind of allude to, like you were the only member. That seems incredibly entrepreneurial-like from a very early stage. Would you categorize it as that kind of experience? Like you were kind of self-directing, or was it, a teacher and a single pupil?
It was more a teacher and a single pupil then, and then from there it was, okay, we're going to make these DVDs for the senior rec dance, and we're going to sell them. And so it was very much him leading me down, like, okay, you want to make videos, but there's also an aspect of this where, like, we need to buy new camcorders, and we need to fund it in a certain way, and the school won't give us money, so how do we go from there? So it was like, we'd go to the coaches and say, all right, we'll do your DVD at the end of the year, pay us $1,000 so we can record every game and then hand them out, and then the parents would buy the DVDs from there. So I actually never connected it to that. That is probably one of the earliest entrepreneurial experiences. I also did or did not bootleg movies in high school.
Who wasn't doing it at that point?
Yeah, that was what the early
statute of limitations is passed.
Yeah, it's been over 10 years from there. But I also grew up in an entrepreneurial family because my grandfather on my dad's side started a transportation company in '89, and my parents on my mom's side started an ice cream store, Sugar and Spice, in the South Hills in '84. So like growing up, I was always around people who own their own businesses, but there was never really a thing of like, they never really said, hey, you should run your own company someday. They were all pushing me towards like go to get a job, because for both of them, it was very much like they had a lot of employees and they had ups and downs, and it was very stressful. And then on like the ice cream store side, they never really went beyond their single shop. It was always like the one shop, and they never, I wouldn't say they ever like, they thrived, they never flourished, never like went out like a Jenny's, or not Jenny's, but Millie's. Like Millie's has multiple shops and all that sort of thing. They just had their one shop, and they went in, and they were always encouraging me like, go to college, go to school, get a job, and like work for somebody else. There was never really that thing of like, this is why we're entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And I think that's so interesting because we're like at this weird cultural point where, doing something entrepreneurial is put on such a pedestal, but like you were basically, you could say pushed or allowed to like find your own way into doing your own thing, as opposed to like, I think that there's a cohort that is entrepreneurial for entrepreneurial's sake, as opposed to like scratching a distinct itch or addressing a specific problem.
Yeah, there's people that want to put it in their Instagram bio.
Yeah.
And there's people like who you've had on the podcast where he just loves making whiskey, and he is entrepreneurial in his old job at his career, and then he went off and did his own thing because he was like he couldn't not do it. And so there's people that want to start a t-shirt company and do dropship e-commerce and because they want to say they're entrepreneurs, but then there's people like, say his name, I can't.
Jason Wolf?
No, he was just last week.
Barry Young.
Barry Young. And then there's people like Barry Young who like he loves this passion so much and he wants to go do it. And so, yeah, like growing up, it was never a thing. It was always very much like you will go to college and you will go get a job. And it wasn't really like go to a trade school or do this other thing. And so I actually have been pushing my brother a lot in that way, like don't go to college because we as Shanahan men are not built for college. My dad actually just went to a technical school and then he worked for IBM, did computers and everything. But I struggled through college a lot. My non-core or my non-specialty classes, which were design, like those ones like art classes and anything that I had to like create, I was really good at. But like math and science and English, like all those core classes, I struggled through those constantly, and I really did not like it, but I pushed myself through it enough. My sisters are a different story, but like I don't know, the men in this family are not cut out for higher education.
So when did you realize you could not pursue men's fashion as a line of work, as an interest, as a content that needed to be created, as an endeavor?
That came pretty late. So I worked out of school, or actually while I was in school, I worked for Apple. I started working at the Ross Park store. Like I opened that store, and then within there, I got experience to how a multinational, huge company works, from training and education and sales process, like everything I got exposed to there. So I was there for 4 years, and at the time, I was going to school, and then I was taking 18 credits, and I was working full time at Apple. So like my memory of that time,
may have also contributed to your struggles.
No, not necessarily. Like I could separate those two. Even if I were to sit down for 8 hours and say, like, I have to do this math problem, I'd sit there for 8 hours and struggle for 8 hours.
Okay, respect.
And so, like, that really, I thrive when I'm busier, for sure. And so then, as I was finishing school, I got approached by Chief Marketing Officer of Edgar Snyder, which is Sandy Snyder, his wife, and I worked for her for a while. So I started working there full-time, and I was still working at Apple because, like, I couldn't let go of the Apple thing. And then my leaving of that company was coincided with the divorce of Edgar Snyder, and I was working for the wife, and so like that all kind of fell apart at the same time. And then I like struggled for a while because I didn't know like what I wanted to be when I grew up. I still know what I want to be when I grow up, but I struggled like what kind of job do I get? I can remember standing on the floor at Apple Googling on the computers there because you can use the computers all day, and I was like jobs that travel, and it was like insurance agent, like insurance adjuster, or like all these goofy things, but there was nothing that ever really said like, okay, so that I couldn't really find anything that I wanted to do. And then from there, I took this job where, I don't know how much, I took this job where I was selling credit card processing machines. Like it was a bad job. It was like a 1099 job that I found on Craigslist that you would walk into companies and like, you need to buy this credit card machine. And it was kind of a ripoff. And I couldn't, after I understood the mechanics of it, I couldn't bring myself to go into companies, small businesses, family businesses. Like I have a family business, an ice cream store. Like I couldn't bring myself going in. So I had no sales at that company, which I would look bad to them, but like I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Speaks to your character.
Yeah. I'm an Eagle Scout. I did that in high school as well. And so then from there, I used to work with a guy at Apple, and he was like, hey, this company, First Insight's doing really cool stuff. CEO's young company, like growing. You should come in and interview. And I got really lucky when I interviewed because the COO at the time said, okay, all these big, expensive sales guys that we used to hire, they're not working out. I want young guys that want to learn, that are scrappy, I can teach them the process, and then they can go out and sell. And so I was one of 3 guys that were hired under that premise because I was, at this point, I had very little like actual business-to-business sales experience, and I had very little experience of any other way. But I went into a 6-figure sales job for a startup software company with very experienced men who had created software and created companies before. And like, if I didn't have Apple, I don't know who I'd be today. If I didn't have that job, I also don't know who I'd be today, because that was the most incredible experience. To like, I went from walking into businesses trying to sell them like credit cards to going into huge multi-billion multinational retailers telling the CEO, you have a problem and this is how we're going to solve it. And so to have that like exposure is what completely changed the trajectory of my life. And so I started that in May of 14, and at that point I was engaged, and in December of 14 I got married, and I was on my honeymoon. And when I'm left to my own devices, this is when problems happen. So I spent that whole year basically going through the process of like redoing my wardrobe. I had to get nicer suits. I had to like upgrade my wardrobe to present myself better. But it all kind of started at Edgar Snyder, because that was the first place that I had to wear a shirt and tie every day and like dress a little bit better. And all the lawyers wore suits. And so that was the first, Edgar Snyder was the first place I started. Apple, you can wear whatever you want. You can wear cargo shorts and flip-flops. Nobody cares. But then at First Insight, it was like, you're going into CEO meetings. You don't need to have a suit, but you need to be presentable and well-dressed and well-groomed and everything. And so I'll never forget, I was on the beach in Aruba for my honeymoon, and I was telling my wife, I was like, you know what, all these brands, nobody does YouTube videos, like I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. And she was like taking a nap, and she was like, all right, that sounds great. And so like from there my head just spun like the entire time getting home. And then I went home, I registered the domain on Hover, and then I created the YouTube channel, because after that point I thought, okay, name, all the philosophy behind the channel, like everything I want to do, it all kind of catalyzed in Aruba, because I couldn't find what I wanted on YouTube. There wasn't really people talking about the brands. I could see early on there was this split between all the creators that do a lot of like sponsored content, and it's like they'll say all the nice things they'll say whenever they're sponsored, but then like how do you discern that, between that sort of thing? And so I saw that very early on, and I also saw that there was a shift in 2015. That was when like Facebook wasn't really in video yet. You could put videos on Facebook, but people hadn't gone in there. And I was like, video is going to be big. I have this background in video. I really want to create videos. I'm really passionate about men's style. I need to buy all these clothes anyway. Nobody's talking about them. And so that was like how it all really started. And then I was just like, all right, from there, I knew I had to get my first video up very soon, because I knew I could also, and I see this with the guys that reach out to me now, it's like, I want to start something, I have this idea, and I always tell them, like, just post something, get something started, because you could sit there forever and never move forward, but until you start to get some kind of feedback, until you make it real, that's when things start to move. So I registered like January 1st of 2015. My first video was up on the 15th of January, so it took me like 2 weeks to get it up. And I knew that year, I was like, all right, I'm going to post like once a month, just some sort of cadence, because I had a monthly subscription box for clothing. And I was like, I'll just post every month I get one of these, and people want to see that. And I can remember the very first comment I ever got. It was from this guy named Geron. He was Canadian, because it was a Canadian brand. And he was like, hey, cool video, man. And I was like, yes. And at that point, I still had emails. I would get emails for every comment. Yep. So I was like sitting somewhere, and I was like, oh my God, somebody found my video. Because I also didn't promote it. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my friends about the channel for 2 years at least. Because it was like, it's kind of like this weird thing. And I knew my family wasn't into clothing and style. So it's just kind of like sat over here and like did my stuff in the corner and like made my videos and posted them on YouTube. And but yeah, I can remember the first comment I got. And then from there, it was just a very slow roll to start to build that.
I want to talk about that process, but the philosophy is really interesting to me. Like anyone doing anything, anywhere, going in any direction, the philosophy that they take to their work is so impactful in where they end up. And so to just put a little bit more color on the picture, there's all this world in digital marketing, in digital content creation. You're looking at people that are potentially using affiliate links, and so they have a vested interest to maybe point you towards said expensive thing or what have you. And then as you spoke to sponsored posts, well, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not like referencing, let's use a big thing, Nike. If Nike pays me to make a video and I spend the whole video just talking about these Nike shoes and the Nike jacket and how amazing it is, there's like a reason beyond maybe perhaps my authentic opinion that I would be stating that opinion. So you were making a very specific philosophical choice not to do that. And really what I'm hearing is prioritize the audience, the trust that your audience will have in you, that like you'll buy something nice and be like, this really isn't worth the money to me, or it is an incredibly impactful place to stand, particularly, we can talk about the impact in retail specifically, but just in general, putting the trust of the audience on a pedestal above everything else really sounds like the core of the philosophy that you had.
Yeah, especially as we were like buying stuff for our house, or like I'm really into technology. To me, the wire cutter, even like when did they launch? 2012. Like I was in there very early, and to me, I would Google like audio, like XLR, blah blah blah, wire cutter. Like that's how I like imagined my eventual YouTube channel being. It's like if somebody wants loafers, loafer Kavalier, or dress pants Kavalier. Like I thought of that very early on, and I also knew that I would have to approach it that way from the beginning in order to like make sure I'm building that over time. And so like I do have the way that I've built it from there is really, I try to use affiliate links because the affiliate links are the best way to stay independent of the brand. I still do. There's sponsorships that are involved in it, but I can be so selective about it because I don't have to say yes to anybody. And I've said no for 4 years to everything that's come across my way. And so from the beginning, I was like, I want to be the resource that people can go to and trust the same way that people trust Consumer Reports or the Wirecutter the same way that I do, so that I can make sure, I have built this long-lasting brand over time, because it's way more. The quick buck is not nearly as impactful as this long-term thing. There's a quote in the House of Cards. He says, "Money is the beach house that crumbles at the first storm, but power is the stone house that wears through centuries," or something. And it's like I can remember that quote too, and I was like, yes, like that's where I'm going. Like I'm in it for the long run, because I also knew that like my family's been in business for 35 years in an ice cream store, 30 years in Shanahan Transportation. They're like a known name in the industry, and I just don't see any benefit to moving quickly and just trying to like trip over yourself almost.
Yeah. So talk about the patience over those 4 years, from video one, once a month, to now studio in the backyard and all the gear and all the other stuff that's going on.
It definitely took a while. So like I would post once in a while, and like I was gaining subscribers, but like if you wanted to grow a YouTube channel, you wouldn't do it the way that I did it. Like I very early on realized, like, all right, if I want to be the resource for people searching for things, I need to put out more videos on more brands than anybody else. If you want to grow a YouTube channel with like this passionate, dedicated audience that watches every video, you got to put out like 1 or 2 a week that everybody wants to watch. My videos, it's like I just did a video on like a skincare routine. It's like not many people are going to watch that, even if they're subscribed and want to know my opinion. It's only going to be the guys that want to spend $90 on a skincare routine and you want to learn more about that, or like briefcases, that sort of thing. And so I would just do it basically every day between 5 and 7 in the morning. I'd wake up, go shoot a video, edit it, and then try and get it posted. And then when I realized that the more I posted and the more brands I could do, I just increased the cadence. So the first year was like once a month, sometimes twice a month. The second year, I was like, all right, I need to do this like once a week. And then I could just see the momentum building. So I was like, all right, I need to do this every weekday. And so then that's when I really ramped it up and said, okay, every day, I'm going to edit this video, get this thing up. And so year 3 is really when I started to see some level of growth. And that's when I could also see, when I started it, I was like, someday maybe I'll be able to do this on my own. And year 3 was the time where I was like, all right, I think I'm like onto something here. And then that's when I could get, audience and subscriber numbers that were meaningful. And I was getting enough inbound questions from guys that like I knew things were resonating. And that's when I started to say like, okay, I can see a path. And the hardest thing though is going from, I have this lifestyle that is predicated on getting a check every month, or and I should also say too, like I was working a lot for the startup. Like I covered Europe for a while, so I was going back and forth to Europe a ton. I was going to the West Coast a lot. I was traveling, so like there's a lot of like late night plane rides where I'm like in coach, huddled over my laptop, like editing this video, trying not to let the guy next to me see that I'm editing a video of myself, changing my clothes in a bedroom. Like there was some odd times going through there. And so as I was going through that process, I was like, all right, I need to get to a place where I can cut off this like very important part of me so that I can go do this other thing. And that's when we ratcheted down, because from the beginning, like when my wife and I got married, we pretty much knew she wasn't going to work. And so we knew she was going to be like stay-at-home mom. Like she was 6 months pregnant when she graduated college from Duquesne. And so from there, it was like we had a ton of student loans, and then I had student loans. And so it was like in that third year, I was like, all right, if this is ever going to be a thing, we need to get rid of the student loans. We need to pay off all of our cars. We need to have no credit card debt. Like, we have a mortgage over here, and that'll keep going. And so like that year is when she just said yesterday, she's like, you treated us like we were on food stamps or something. Like, yes, that's the way you got to do it in order to get rid of that big thing so you can come over here and take a big risk. And so it was calculated for years that we would eventually go that way. It just, it definitely, they say like it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. I just went into it with that mentality. It was like Edgar Snyder is a huge name now, but he was pointing on TV for years before anybody paid attention to him. And so it just takes a long time. So it's good to have great examples around me of that.
But so, like, when did it even flip, though? Because if I was, let's just say, a comedic personality, and every week I'm going to do a video and I'm going to try to make someone laugh, or use a simple premise. I really just need the camera and my wits and some time editing. But you're also interacting with all these different brands, and, at the one end of the spectrum, when you're established, brands are going to send you stuff because they want it reviewed and they want that exposure that your channel can bring. But in the early stages, like, that's not starting to flow in by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, no, not at all. And that's why when I started it, I was like, look, I'm buying all these clothes for work anyway. I'm buying all these like nicer brands, but nobody's talking about them. So I'll just make these videos. Okay. And so for the first 2 years, it was like I had to buy every suit, I had to buy every pair of shoes, I had to buy everything. And I was already going to buy it anyway. This just became a nice way to also justify, like, all right, if I need to spend $50 more on this pair of shoes, I also need it for my channel, not just for work. Okay. And so, for the first 2.5 years, and still to this day, like, I can't get attention from any brand. I just like go buy it, and then that becomes part of it. And so, and that also helps me too. It's like if I go out and buy the thing, I can say whatever I want about it. If a brand sends you something, it's like there's always that little bit of thing in the back of your mind, like, oh, maybe it's nice, but then I very quickly cut that off because somebody sent me something once and it was so bad, and I did a video, and to this day they want to pay me to take it down. But I was very quickly able to separate like where this thing came from and how I got it into I can say whatever I want about it.
Wow. So do you ever watch the Barstool pizza reviews?
No,
Dave Portnoy. So he'll go into a pizza place and he'll buy a pizza and it'll come out and he'll give it like a rating 1 to 10, like 6.8, 7.2, whatever. We do that sometimes, like just for fun with Piper. And it's always like if the owner, like if he meets the owner of the pizza shop or they recognize him, and then they're like standing at the door just waiting to see their review. He's like, I feel a lot of pressure here to make sure that this is, a little bit more inflated when there's that social pressure.
I can see that, especially like it's like I know my uncle makes all the ice cream, so it's like you can only say so many negative things to him before you kind of like burn that bridge. But yeah, that's funny. Right. Pizza reviews. Like
so when we think about so the Kavalier, creating a brand that is, a lot of people will go in this direction, and even as I've seen some of the other men's fashion accounts that you kind of interact with, they'll create something that might be very on the nose, like men's fashion reviews or something, like straight to the point, or it'll be like their identity. Mm-hmm. You made a choice to come up with this word, the Kavalier, with a K, that like it's novel, it's different. You're pulling it in this other direction. I'm guessing that also speaks to kind of the upward potential of this transcending Jon Shanahan, the individual. But take me a little bit through like where that came from and the aspirations for it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the reason you didn't make Aaron Watson's media LLC to do Piper, and it's from there. Like, so the Kavalier is German for gentleman. K, it's an old world like German word for gentleman. And I definitely, even at the time, even 4 years ago, I saw like everybody was like gentleman's lifestyle, gentleman this and that. And I wanted like a subtle way to convey that, but I also always wanted to be bigger than myself. So like I've had other guys on my channel where it's like, hey, I'm Gabriel in for the Kavalier, like that sort of thing. Like I always pictured it being more than myself because I don't want it to be just about me. I want it to be different like skin tones and body types. And like I have a friend who's come over he's losing his hair. And so we're trying out different like hair loss type of things. And so I always wanted it to be more than just myself because, I think Gary Vee is a very odd example where he's a huge personality. He is his own brand, but then like, big companies or successful companies are built by teams. And I never wanted it to be, my family's transportation company is Shanahan Transportation. It's like that is a family name versus Sugar and Spice, which is an ice cream store. And so I always lean towards having like not just be about me, and I don't want to name it, it would be very easy to name it Jon Shanahan's Fashion Exploration or something like that.
Certainly. Talk about the balancing though of, we're talking about fancier clothes generally and larger ticket purchases relative to many people may ever have made on a piece of clothing or a piece of apparel, and the balance of handling or working with or being used to this higher end product and the efforts to make it accessible to the common man. Because like I'm someone who has a very limited fashion sense. A lot of the credit for anything that I wear that might look good goes to Ashley. And when I watch some of your videos, there is a degree to which I'm like, wow, that's like, outside the scope of something that I would usually use, but at least I hear it as speaking to someone in my shoes who might be interested, doesn't really like necessarily understand it, and being that kind of translator of sorts.
Yeah, I definitely found over time I've narrowed my approach to thinking about, especially who I was when I was first starting my first job, and you wanted to go to Express or Banana Republic or J. Crew, like you wanted to go to these brands that you think are like these luxury brands. And then, because what happened to me is I bought all these clothes for Edgar Snyder. I bought like $400 worth of stuff at Express, like dress pants and slacks and ties. And after 6 months, after washing them like once or twice, they totally deteriorated. And I was so like angry at the brand, but I didn't realize at the time, like, oh, Express isn't the best brand out there. It's just a pricier brand that makes pretty good clothes.
In the middle of the mall.
And so that's what led me to like Bonobos, who makes like at nearly the same price, nicer stuff. And so what I've now come to really focus on is like the guy like you who's just starting out as a young professional, or maybe the guy who has worked for a while and has always let his wife buy his clothes and that sort of thing, and just wants to take like the next step into things. So you're no longer buying like $40 or $50 Target or $30 Target chinos. You want to go like just a little bit better fit, just a little bit better fabric, and go into there. I've definitely gone into the higher end. Like I have a couple of suits that are like really custom and like a couple $1,000s. But like if you want to go for your first suit, instead of going out to Men's Warehouse for like $200, it's like those are okay. But if you go to like $500, like that's a great suit that you're gonna wear for 10 years. And so what I've really sort of honed in on is like just taking guys from here's my basic stuff that I always went to, just to the next level up. And then there's plenty of places that do like luxury and much higher end things, but there's really, even to this day, there's still nobody where I'm at, which is like, hey, great chinos are like $80, $90. Like just go buy those and you'll save yourself money in the long run. And that was a learning for me too, is, I bought all these cheap clothes, and even until like college, I was still wearing all the clothes my grandma would buy me like on my birthdays and Christmas. So it was never really important until the Edgar Snyder thing. And that's when I was like, okay, so if I buy this little bit nicer stuff, it lasts longer, it looks better, I feel better wearing it, I look more presentable. And so it's, you're definitely like my target audience, which is like, I'm getting conscious of quality stuff. Instead of buying a 10-pack of tees, I could buy these 2 really nice ones, but they're going to feel better and, look better in wearing them and everything like that. So.
Totally. Another interesting thing has started to happen, which is these meetups that you've done. I saw you did the one in San Francisco. You're doing one in Pittsburgh in a little bit. And just to occupy this different space with your brand. Like I can remember the first time I did the summit, and like I had an idea that people would show up and like, it's going to be on this date. I hope people come. I have the speakers. But like to actually see that manifest into the real world, where because of what you put out in a digital environment, there's now real humans in front of you with context, a basis for conversation beyond just first base, has to be a bit of a mind trip.
Yeah, I started that when I was traveling a lot for work. I'd be in the city and I would just post like, hey, I'm going to be at this bar. Like if you want to come say hi. And it happened a few times where guys would come out and be like, I can't believe you're here. Like it's weird to see you in person. And so when I left my job in September, that was the first time where I was like, all right, I'm going to New York for a couple of days. I'm staying with a friend. I'm going to meet all these brands, but why don't I also see how many guys I can get together? And so the New York one in October is the first one where like we had 4 of my friends that also have channels or Instagram pages. They came out. We talked to a brand that hosted us in their space, and then we just opened it up to the audience, said, hey, if you guys want to come out, hang out, say hi, that sort of thing. So we did New York, and then we did D.C., and then we did Chicago, Nashville, San Francisco, and then Pittsburgh is on the 26th here. And so I felt bad that like I did all these cities across the world and I didn't do my hometown that I've been here for 20 some years. And so, but to take it into the physical space. And what I also get a lot of feedback from, like especially the Chicago one, guys were like, thank you for bringing out other guys that care about this stuff. Like it's hard to find guys that are interested in this and that sort of thing. So I could see guys like exchanging like Instagram handles and everything like that. And so and the San Francisco one went well too. That was like a group of other creators open up the audience. And then I actually, with that one, I worked with the past couple of them, like I'll work with a brand and say, hey, I'm coming to the city. Like, will you cover the tab if we all go out and that sort of thing? And so that's a really nice way to like, the brand gets a little bit of exposure. We're able to go out and meet the audience. The audience has a nice night out. And so I'm trying to do more of those because there is one conference in our space where it happens once a year and like a couple hundred guys go. It can be a little bit expensive to like get the hotel and everything, but it's like if I'm going to these cities and I can open it up and say, hey, come meet me. I want to meet you and say hi, because all day, like I'm in my Instagram DMs constantly, and I got a lot of guys asking questions, and just I've developed relationships with those guys. I can recognize a lot of guys from the comments, like I can see their avatars. I'm like, oh, this guy's been around for a while, and so like to take that into the physical space, it's like probably the most rewarding thing about it. Let alone like I'll get really nice emails and guys will say like thanks and everything, and I print those out, put them in a folder. But the physical meetups are really nice.
I'm sure. Yeah, I have a good buddy who is in wealth management, and it can be a brutal business at times, and he saves a stack of similar like nice messages, nice notes that he gets, and whenever there's one of the days it's a valley, check in there, get some dose of gratitude. And
I have a lot of screenshots. I have an Evernote note where I just have screenshots of like nice ones. I haven't had to dip into it for any reason. Like I've getting very lucky that I have very little negativity on my channel for like.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because I'm not telling guys they're idiots. There's a lot of channels that they'll say like why you're ugly, or this is why women don't like you.
Oh.
And they'll also say
and
like
that's like clickbaity too. Like that's like getting let me hack the attention.
Yeah, I also never want to or have ever done that. But they'll also say like, this is why you don't feel good wearing your clothes. You got to wear it this way. Like I don't really I'm not very prescriptive. I'm descriptive. And so like, here's why I like this thing. Here's why this thing is nice. I'm not really saying like, you're a dummy because you bought this thing and come over here. And I see that because other channels that I follow, I'll see that in the comments like I can't believe XYZ. And so I've been very lucky that I get very few personal attacks. I've only had to block one person on my channel in the past 4 years, and I have other friends with similar sized channels where they're blocking people like every few days. And so I have developed a thicker skin, but I haven't really had any full-on negativity.
Good. Well, this podcast is the change of all that.
This is going to be the honeypot for all the negativity.
Yeah. On the front of reaching out to these brands, so what's interesting to me is there's a degree to which the brands are studying the accounts and they're saying, okay, whatever tool we may have, like they're above this size audience, we can measure maybe their engagement and other elements, and that's someone that we want to potentially work with. And then there's the flip side of, as a creator, as someone with an audience that you've cultivated, figuring out how to actually create that business for yourself can be an obstacle, because we'll interact with people as Piper's grown a little bit with different characters, and you'll see someone
characters is a good word for it.
Different characters, but you'll see someone with a substantial account that doesn't have the kind of minute aspect of business sense for how to actually turn this into a business, as opposed to just a magnet for attention. And then on the flip side, you have one with very little, creative chops, not really that substantial of a following, but they know exactly how, whether it's through hustle or through just like understanding the.
You just described me. That's me.
Goals to create those opportunities for themselves. So speak a little bit about that, because even the way you just kind of said offhand, like we'll get a brand to cover the drinks or the tab at an event, like that's not easy for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that comes from just growing up and always being around the entrepreneurial mindset. Like my dad, every single like long car ride, I can just remember drilling my dad with questions like, why is this sign that way? Who's this truck driver? This thing. And like, I was always very curious. And even just today, I was on a call with somebody talking about this project we're working on. And I was like, oh, why don't we suggest, this, we asked them about this thing. And she was like, I didn't think about that. And so I definitely started out with it from the beginning of like, all right, I'm gonna build this as a business and a company. I need to think about it in those terms. And I think it has like kind of separated like, oh, I could spend more time on the creative aspect of things, but I also know that I need to pay my healthcare and like feed my children and everything like that. And so I also, when you described about the difference between the two accounts, like I'd punch above my weight on YouTube. I do way more monthly views than a channel of my size should technically do based on my metrics. So because I set my channel up in this way where I do so many videos and so many brands, I rank really high in SEO and search. And so people find my videos and watch way more of them. Whereas like another channel that might have 80,000 subscribers might do like 200,000 monthly views. And that's great for them because they do a couple of videos a month. Like I'm over here doing like 3 times that. And so I always start from the beginning of like, okay, if I'm going to build this as a serious thing, I need to think about the ways that each milestone that I grow. And so like I would never reach out to a brand if I had, less than a certain amount of followers, because they're not going to pay attention. It's not going to,
it's not substantial enough for them in their own marketing objectives.
And they're also not going to value in a certain way. Like if a brand looks at you and you have a certain level of engagement, it's like they're just not really going to give you the time of day. And then now that I've even once I crossed like the 5,000 subscriber mark, that's when I started getting like a lot of brands, like inbound stuff. So like half of my inbox each day is a brand saying like, hey, we want to send you this thing. And now I'm in a really good place where I just basically say, no thanks, no thanks, no thanks. But then like every once in a while, because there's this like pie chart of, 90% of stuff isn't really worth my time. I wouldn't present it in front of my audience. I wouldn't buy it myself. I don't really care. There's like this 5% it's like a maybe. And then there's like one diamond in the rough every time where it's like, this is perfect for my audience. I really like it. It looks well made, like that sort of thing. And so, yeah, there's definitely people who go into this and there's a certain degree of luck that they grew. And I just had a conversation with a creator this weekend where he's considerably larger, but there's a vast difference in the business sense, and he's like struggling. And so like if you don't go into it with both sides of things, it's like it's the Jobs and Wads or the Gates and Ballmer. It's like you got to have both sides of the thing, and it seems like you definitely have that with Hannah and yourself. Is like you got to have the business sense, you got to have somebody that understands financials, and you got to have the thing that makes the business churn and run, which is a lot of the creativity and the differentiation between things. Because if you don't have that blend of all of them, it's like you can be the most artistic guy in the world, but no one's going to see your art if you can't get it into a shop, or if you can't walk into a shop owner and say, I want to put this on the wall, and that sort of thing. And so that also, like my thicker skin came from that sales job where I was like for a month I would walk into a deli shop and say, hey, what about how's your credit card processing? And you had to open up the conversation in a certain way, which was like not leading them into understanding that you're a credit card salesperson. Mm-hmm. You'd be like, oh, how's business, or like what's your most popular thing? Like I can't tell you how many sandwiches or cups of coffee I bought during that job just trying to open up the conversation with the waitress to be like, so who is the owner, and where is he at right now? Because I need to talk to him about your credit card processing. And so that's where all of the hustle porn or like entrepreneurial stuff where people want to go and just go do this on their own, I think there's so much value lost in the jobs that you take that you have no idea how it's applicable to what you eventually want to do. Like I could never have connected the dots that I would have worked in marketing for Edgar Snyder, sold credit card processing companies, sold B2B predictive analytics software, to now being a YouTube channel. Like if I was sitting in high school right now and I was like, I want to be a YouTuber someday where I review menswear, like I never would have connected those dots. I might have gotten there a little bit faster, but I wouldn't be nearly as well versed in the business side of things because I would never have had the experience of dealing with a procurement company and knowing the ins and outs of how companies buy software, to now come over here and say this is how you engage with a big brand and the professionalism that's required from there. Because I have a couple of friends that went straight into YouTube, and like you can see in the way that they engage with brands, it's like that's not the way you should do it in the business world. And so I think there is a lot of, there's some value in education that you get the degree and get the network and that sort of thing, but the amount of learning that you get on the job for something is so underrated, I think, in where we're sitting now. Because everybody wants to go off and do their own thing immediately, but the amount of stuff that you learn dealing with other people in a company or dealing with 2 other companies is so important, and you have to take everything you can learn, even if it's just an entry-level job and you're getting coffee. If you're around the decision makers and you can understand the mechanics of like this is why they went forward with a certain campaign and that sort of thing. I'm sure you experienced that as you did your first couple of jobs right out of school. And 100%. That's the reason Piper is who it is now.
Yeah, to me, the absolute unfair advantage that I feel like I have relative to other people in my shoes is that the proximity that I've had to really high-level operators. Yeah. So, in the first year that I was doing the podcast, I interviewed this guy, Barry Ritholtz, and he's one of the biggest finance bloggers on the planet. And I went into his office in Manhattan. And not that, like, I now know how to run his business and I can go do that, but up to that point, I'd done some financial services stuff. Like I had the like lowest level framework of success and execution. And then you're just comparing and contrasting that to someone who is the absolute highest level operator. And it creates a new framework for you, and you probably absorb things in the same way that you were alluding to with your story, like that you didn't even realize you were absorbing. But then it also just, raises the bar, it raises the watermark for what's even possible.
Yeah. And that's what the people that what do you call that?
Creative apprentices. And
that's what you have, the creative apprentices. They don't even realize, like, everything. It's not even just the stuff you're assigned to do. It's like all of this in between stuff, whether how you interact with each other, or how you interact and watching you and making all the decisions. It's like to put yourself, what do they say in Hamilton, in the room where it happens, to put yourself around the people that are making decisions. Like one of the best things I did is when Sandy Snyder came into the Apple store to buy all these computers, and I joked with her about her hiring me. It's like I never would have worked for that company if I hadn't joked with her that she was going to hire me. And then she put me in the room where I can remember when Google Glass launched, and she goes, "Get me a Google Glass and figure out how I advertise on it." And I was like, I can do that. So I went to my desk and I was like, how do I get a Google Glass? And it's like, that's the sort of stuff that you have to there is a lot of falling into this opportunity, but it's also about embracing it. So like if I could have got that job and I could have said, I want to be doing, I want to be doing a lot more Twitter, but Sandy won't let me do Twitter. So I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to go on Reddit and search menswear blogs for that sort of stuff. Like I could have done that, but putting yourself in front of that stuff and embracing it and just being like, I can learn so much from this opportunity, I think is what some people don't really want to open themselves up to.
Yeah. So we're going to aim towards wrapping up, but I have a question here.
I wanted to set the record for the longest going deep.
We'll be up there. We'll be in the top 10. Okay. What room, you can get into any room right now, what room do you wish you could get into, or would you love to find a way to make your way into to help you hit the next level?
Oh, to help me hit the next level?
Yeah.
I have a really curious one. So I did a video on J. Crew and Mickey Drexler. J. Crew is kind of like sliding towards like this bankruptcy thing, and there's a lot of stuff going on with that brand. I'm fascinated to watch that unfold. I also really like to watch how Sears is kind of navigating this stuff. But like to level myself up, it would really be to understand how somebody like the Wirecutter operates at scale. So like the Wirecutter started off as like one dude blogging, brought some people in, they started blogging, they were sold to the New York Times for $30 million, and now they operate inside the New York Times. But I listened to a lot of podcasts with media executives and the way that they're thinking about the future of media, because I think of myself as a media company. It's like I'm a media entity, I got to support myself in a certain way. I want to have like writing standards and guidelines and that sort of thing. And so to see a company operate at a scale that is digitally native, like it wouldn't be helpful for me to see Hearst. Like Hearst operates Elle and Cosmo and all this other stuff, but like to see a digitally native brand like that, to really how they operate and understand today. I mean, the Wirecutter to me has always been like the gold standard. And actually there was an interview where Brian Lamb, the founder, he was asked, he was like, oh, so what's next for you? And he's like, I'm really interested in like fashion. And like I emailed him and I was like, you have no idea. I'm doing this fashion thing and I based it on the Wirecutter, and I never heard from him. So he's off on a boat somewhere.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good answer. This was a great interview. Thank you so much for coming in and being on the show, Jon.
I have 100,000 more things to say. But no, it's been great.
Let's provide the digital coordinates where people can follow along if they want to see what you're doing on YouTube and across all the different channels. Where can people connect with you?
Well, I have a YouTube channel where I talk about building my YouTube channel. It's just Jon Shanahan. Like if you Google that, you'll pretty much find Jon Shanahan YouTube. And then the Kavalier is like, the brand around menswear, fashion, and lifestyle, and that sort of thing.
Very cool. We're going to link that and a couple other links in the show notes. GoingDeepTherein.com/podcast is the place to find it for this and every episode of the show. But as we do at the end of each conversation, Jon, I want to give you the mic one final time to issue an actionable personal challenge for the audience.
This one's more for guys, but women, same thing, is like if you have clothes in your wardrobe that you're not excited about, get rid of them. You could replace them. But then also the stuff you have, if you take it to a tailor, you're going to look really good for a very little amount of money to just kind of upgrade yourself. And if you will see if you change your personal, your wardrobe just a little bit, how people treat you differently. And I think there's a lot of people that don't want to take that step because it's a little bit uncomfortable. But I think if you get outside your comfort zone a little bit, you'll see what kind of change it can make.
I like that. And the tailoring thing is interesting because, clothes are made for like an average or an archetype. And I was listening to something about how they did a similar thing with the cockpits of jets and how the design of the cockpit was made for the average sized person and no one fit into it because there's literally no one who is just the definition of average. And so really the tailoring speaks to to, you know, even if you are the average height and the average torso length, like maybe your arms are a little long or maybe your shoulders are a little broad or whatever the thing may be.
Yeah, I literally couldn't buy clothes at like a store, which is why I started my channel, because I couldn't find stuff to fit. And so that's another part of it. Like, you just gotta step outside that comfort zone.
Right on. We just went deep with Jon Shanahan. Hope everyone out there has a fantastic day. Hey, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. I'm really curious who you are trying to get in the room with. Who do you want to spend a day with and learn from? Let me know in the comments below.